What's going on, golf fans? It's your boy Gsluke here with our DFS fades and sleepers for this week's PGA Championship. Gonna break down some of the more overhyped and overlooked plays of the week when it comes to the game theory perspective that you might want to keep an eye on from the ownership angle to try and take advantage of in those large field contests. Our fades, of course, going to be some of the guys being a little bit oversteamed coming into lock, and then our sleeper plays on the other end of that spectrum are going to be the players being a little bit overlooked, right? Those diamonds in the rough that you can get at single digit ownership and hopefully bring you some of that ownership leverage you need to take down some of those large field contests. So without further ado, we're actually going to do 3 fades and 3 sleepers this time around. Let's go ahead and get this thing started. As we do with these videos, let's start with our fades of the week, where we're going to be looking at Xander Schauffele at $9,900 as the first suspect player when it comes to ownership. He's $9,900 and he is the highest owned player as of right now per my ownership projections at right around 20%. Those top end players like a Scotty, John Rahm are only in the 18-19% range, which shows you just how much people are trying to jam in the X-Man here. And I get it, the form is there, right? Second in recent form rank, has been unbelievably consistent this season, making pretty much every cut, finishing top 25 and 80% plus of his starts, is why people are seeing that recent form and wanting to get there in bunches. What I worry about is the upside in this kind of field, right? He's not the best player in this field. In terms of long-term form, he's probably closer to this Tony Finau JT range than he is this true top tier. And on top of that, this $9,900 price tag does a lot psychologically. If he was $10,000 exactly, which they could have fit him in there, right below a Brooks Koepka, I can guarantee you that he would be 5, maybe even 7% lower owned, because when you compare him to his counterparts here in the 10K range, like a Morikawa, like a Brooks Koepka, for example, he's double the ownership, sometimes 3-4 times higher owned than some of his peers. And even when you compare him to a Patrick Cantlay, who I love as a core play this week, that I thought was going to be mega chalk, right? We talked about that on the Monday video. Well, because of Xander Schauffele, that's not the case. In fact, Xander Schauffele's higher owned, significantly higher owned right now than what I have Patrick Cantlay at. So if he's going to suck up all the ownership, if he's going to be that black hole at the top of the 9K range, well, that makes him a relatively easy pivot when it comes to the game theory angle. A few other things to note. Off the tee, right, over the last few events, he's been sharp, but before that, he was losing 2-3 strokes an event, right? That was a 2-3 event stretch. That was a little bit concerning to people like me that were looking into the analytics. And if he does that around in Oak Hill, well, he stands no chance to go out there and get into contention. So again, that's a few events behind him at this point. He's looked a lot better since that little downturn that he had, but still concerning. That's only like a month or two away at this point, right? We're not too far removed from that sort of play from Xander. Next up, we've got Tony Finau. He's not one of the higher-owned players on the slate, but certainly for this range, we're just below that Patrick Cantlay, Xander Schauffele level of ownership. Then you have this Tony Finau at 17.7%. Obviously, Jordan Spieth is one of the lowest owned players in this range. Even JT is significantly lower owned than a Finau. Cameron Smith, Cam Young, Victor Hovland are all sometimes even half the ownership of what you're going to get here with the Tony Finau. So he's getting that same kind of love that a Xander Schauffele is, and a lot of it is because of the recent form, right? Had the win there at the Mexico Open, has been playing pretty solid golf for quite some time. That's why we were on him there for that win over there in Vedanta Vallarta. But what I worry about here is much of the same. He's not that much better than all of the other guys around him. I mean, even a hurt Jordan Spieth is 80, maybe 85% of a Tony Finau, right? So obviously assuming that Jordan Spieth plays, if he's going to be 4 or 5 times lower owned, then yeah, I'm going to play the Jordan Spieths of the world. I'm going to play the JTs of the world, who I absolutely love going into the week. I think is just as good a course fit as a Tony Finau. Cam Smith, I know he's on live, right? He has a few unknowns with him, but long term, Cam Smith, a much better player than Tony Finau, right? Actually has major championship pedigree. I mean, even Cam Young, Victor Hovland, I'm expecting to be a little bit more successful in majors than Tony Finau has been to this point. So unless you think this is the spot that he 100% breaks out, then what are we doing, right? We have guys around him that have actually gotten it done before that have higher upside that are much lower owned. So for me, it's not just the Jordan Spieth pivot, which I'm only going to do in maybe like 10% of my lineups this week, but it's more so these guys priced below him that are significantly lower owned. They're cheaper, and I think they're better plays. So, nothing against Finau, nothing against Xander. I understand the plays. The form is there for sure. But when they're carrying so much ownership compared to some of the other people around them, I think it's worthy considering a fade there. And our last fade, we got to go the whole way down to the 7K range, and it's Wyndham Clark. We faded him over there at Wells Fargo. Did not go well, obviously. And I think it's just levels to this game, right? Wyndham Clark took him a while to break through. A lot of people are talking about whether he's going to sustain this success or not. And I think at easier golf courses, I think he's got a lot more of a chance to do so. But when you put somebody in a major championship pressure cooker, like what you're going to have here at the PGA Championship, there's levels to this game, like I said. It takes time to get acclimated to that kind of pressure, to these kind of conditions that are so difficult. And I know no snack over there at Quail Hollow. I mean, he took on one of the more difficult courses on the PGA Tour, but it did not play difficult that week, right? It had a much higher winning score than what you're used to seeing at that kind of event. In terms of your scoring, there were a lot more birdies made at this year's Wells Fargo than we've seen over the last 3-4 iterations. So at $7,500, the fact that there's 16% ownership there, and I think in some single entries, he might approach the 20, maybe even like 21, 22% mark when it comes to that projected ownership, I'm going to have to stay away. There are guys around him, even like Ricky Fowler, right, who is in the same, if not better form, and has actually showed up at these majors before, right? Hasn't won one before, but has gone, into contention more than a handful of times. You have, players priced above him, like a Keegan Bradley that I really like, that are half the ownership, right? We talked about him as a value play. He's not half as likely to succeed as a Wyndham Clark. Abraham Answer, for example, is like 2% owned. He's not 8 times less likely to succeed than a Wyndham Clark. So, again, it's not that I hate the play. These guys, the reason why they're getting this attention is this recent form tab, right? All 3 of them extremely good with the recent form. But just because they've been good over the last 12 measured rounds does not mean they're going to sustain that into the next event, right? The last 3 events matter, right? But how many times do you look at somebody's track record? They go on like a little 2-3 event heater and then completely fall off the face of the earth. It happens all the time. And if they were maybe in the same ownership stratosphere as the guys around them, let's say like Abraham was like 8% and Wyndham was like 12%, then sure, like, yeah, it makes sense, right? You play Wyndham Clark in that situation, but not when it's 8 times less over there with an Answer. Like there's clear pivots to be had, which is why I'm willing to point these guys out as fades. But enough negativity. Let's go over and hop into our sleeper picks now. The other end of the spectrum from the fades. These players are being completely overlooked by the masses, right? So if you're looking to try and get low-owned plays, perhaps differentiate yourself a little bit, these are the players you want to keep an eye on. And I'll remind you, if you want access to all of my player pool, right, not just the guys that I'm pointing out in these videos, check out my Patreon page. There's a bunch of low-owned sleepers I'm getting to. There's even more, chalky plays that I'm going to be staying away from this week, particularly in the 7K range, that I think you should probably consider avoiding. A few 8K guys that are also getting a ton of steam this week. Those probably just important as the ones that we're pointing out here in the video, and that's where you can check all of that out. Just a reminder, link is in the description. But anyways, getting back to these sleeper plays here, we got Shane Lowry $8,300, and he's 4.7% owned. And I wasn't huge on Shane Lowry this week until I heard a little nugget from the course yesterday from Joel Damon. He was doing an interview with Dylan Dyther on Twitter of Golf Digest, and talking about how firm and fast the conditions were. The greens, of course, we knew were going to be lightning. They always are at a classical course like Oak Hill, particularly for a major championship kind of setup. But furthermore, the fairways are extremely firm and fast, which is going to help some of these shorter hitters, right? Like Shane Lowry is not short off the tee, but he's not a bomber. And you've heard all week people talk about how it's going to be a bomber fest. Well, I'm not as sold on that anymore. We've had a few of those quotes talk about how accuracy is going to be just as important as your distance. And for Joel Damon, right, one of the shorter players off the tee, now he's extremely accurate, right? So he can take advantage of those firm fairways, said that it was more than playable enough for him. So Shane Lowry, I think that plays directly into his skill set, right? Go out there, hit a few fairways, maybe even hit irons off the tee at times, and to lean into that iron play and short game, because you're not going to find a better around the green player in this entire field than Shane Lowry, right? He's up there with the JTs of the world, the Patrick Reeds of the world when it comes to that short game. And, you know, the form, it's been a little bit inconsistent, but he's had tons of bright spots this year. I mean, nearly won over there at Honda, nearly won a few times there towards the fall swing. Of late, right, I know the recent form hasn't been insane. It's the reason why he's only $8,300, right? But 16th, what was that? Masters champ, you know, another major championship, was able to finish in the top 20. I think he deserves a little bit more respect than he's getting because he's half the ownership of Burns. He's like 3 times lower owned than Thigala. He's 5 times lower owned than Fitzpatrick. He's 6 times lower owned than a Terrell Hatton, who was another prime candidate to be a fade on here, by the way. Terrell Hatton. He's like 17% owned this week. But Shane Lowry, you know, he's maybe the worst play out of the bunch, right? If you're looking at form especially, right? I mean, look at that, right? He's gaining 0.3 strokes per round. But long term, he kills the courses that are extremely difficult, right? When it's super windy, when it's a slogfest out there, when the scoring average is over par, is when you want to play Shane Lowry, right? He's not maybe the best birdie maker on the PGA Tour, but he's damn good at saving par when he has to. And that's going to be a huge asset here. Again, you've heard people comparing it to Winged Foot, where pretty much all but 3 players, actually all but 2 players ended up over par at that golf tournament. That's the kind of event that he's going to shine at. So 4.7% ownership, count me in on Shane Lowry. Just has the kind of skill set, the kind of grinder attitude you're looking for, and is by far the lowest owned player in that 8K range. Next up, we've got Taylor Moore, who I don't think I gave enough respect to after some of his early performances this year. And I mean, even as a rookie out there, played really well last year, but $7,800, you know, this kid's the legit deal. He's a really good off the tee player. He's established that, and he's a really, really good putter. And we said the same kind of things about Wyndham Clark when he came out early on tour. It was the ball striking that had to come around. Well, let's take a look at Taylor Moore's ball striking record, right? Slight gainer on approach. But like I said, the off the tee and the putter is just off the charts. And around the green, maybe not the best player. So his clear weakness is that he's probably not the best at saving par, right? He's not really that grinder like a Shane Lowry, but you're talking about a ball striking, putting, just electric factory that is Taylor Moore, that at a course that's going to emphasize off the tee play, whether it's accuracy or distance, plays directly into what he's good at, because he's not only long off the tee, he's also one of the more accurate drivers that we have off the tee. And around in Oak Hill, both of those are going to be rewarded. The approach play, like I said, just slightly above average. He needs to have a spike week there. The putter is going to be there. Just don't bleed a bunch of strokes around the green. The beauty is with Taylor Moore, because he's only $7,800, right? He's only 5% owned, right? We don't need him to win. We don't even need him to top 5. We probably don't even need him to top 10 for some of these large field GPPs. A top 15, a top 20 is likely enough, right, to get us into that optimal lineup. So $7,800. I know the around the green's not great. I have to admit, like, that's the reason why he's $7,800. It's the reason why he's not going to be mega chalky this week. But you compare him to Justin Rose. I mean, Adam Scott, I know he's had a few good golf tournaments of late, but Taylor Moore's been much better this year. I mean, even Corey Connors, Moore's been much more consistent this year than Corey Connors, who of course has a win, but from like the full sample size perspective, I'd rather have Taylor Moore's season. Even some of these guys down here, like Ricky, who's played really well of late, Wyndham Clark, Taylor Moore's had. I mean, no, he doesn't have the win, right? Actually, like, I know he doesn't have the win, but look at these performances. Like, he's still having a hell of a season. 27th, 11th. These are decent field events, not amazing fields. 39th there at the Masters. Like, this kid, he needs some respect. That's the point here. Is I don't think enough people are giving him the respect he deserves. I know the shots gained metrics. I mean, let's zoom out. Well, we already looked at the zoom out approach. Let's zoom in a little bit, right? Last 12 measured rounds. See how he's been playing over the last few events. Gaining a bunch off the tee, getting 1.4 strokes per round with the putter, and half a stroke per round with the approach. That's a little bit better, right? We like how he's been hitting the ball over the last 12 measure rounds on approach. Just figure it out around the green. Be a neutral with the chipping this week with some of those around the green shots, and hey, we might have a win out there for Taylor Moore. And lastly, the last sleeper play going way down the board is going to be Matt Kucher, $6,900. And this is all about just grinding it out, right? Matt Kucher, I wasn't on until I heard that quote about the firm and fast fairways. They are going to get some rain on Saturday, so perhaps the later half of Saturday, maybe Sunday, it's not as firm and fast. But the first 2 rounds, we're trying to get to the weekend. Matt Kucher is going to be able to hit some fairways and get it out there a long way. And Matt Kucher has been really good. Really, really good over the last 36 measured rounds. So if we go up here, let's find good old Kucher stats. There you are. He's gaining across the board, right? Off the tee on approach, marginal gains, right? But still gaining in both categories. Around the green has been up there with JT all year in terms of the scrambling stats. I believe is actually #1 on tour and most of the stats now, and gaining half a stroke per round with the putter. We zoom in a little bit more. We take a look at the stats under a microscope. You can see the approach play, maybe not as solid as it was before, but gaining 0.8 around the green, 0.8 per round with the putter, and still gaining off the tee. This guy is defining time. He's got the experience that we're looking for. And if you're looking at bogey avoidance, he is still one of the better players on the PGA Tour in that department. So going to keep it in play. The off the tee distance, I have to say, he's not a bomber by any means, but he's hitting it a lot longer than I think most people give him credit for. He loves the bent grass surface, and he's 5.5% owned, which isn't non-existent, right? There's still guys around him that are lower owned than Matt Kucher, but he's not mega chalky, right? Mito Pereira is higher owned. Tom Hoagie's up there in terms of ownership. Ben Griffin, Yannick Paul, right, is getting a little bit of attention. And by the way, Yannick Paul, great play this week. But, just above him is the 7K range where you have plenty of guys in that 10-12% range. 5.5% on Matt Kucher, I think is fair. I think you put him in 12, maybe 15% of your lineups this week, and you feel pretty good about it. So I think that he's got the upside, particularly with those firm and fast fairways, to maybe crack the top 15, top 20 at this kind of event. And like I was saying with Taylor Moore, right, who's kind of in this value range, that's all you need. You don't need him to go out there, finish top 5 to get into the optimal lineup. That'd be great, right? He has that within his range of outcomes for sure. It's a low percentage outcome, but he can definitely still get there. So count me in there at $6,900. Alrighty guys, that is all I've got for the fades and sleepers. Before you're hopping out of here, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already so you don't miss any other content in the future. But also, comment your top fade of the week, right? That one guy who's highly owned that you're not just sold on this week, and give me one sleeper play that you're on that most people aren't using as a core piece this week. We're going to be doing our live stream tonight as per usual, so that'll be at 7 p.m. Eastern. If you have any questions for me, bring them by onto the live stream and we'll make sure to get all of those answered for you. We'll go through the weather as well, see if there's any edge to be had between the two waves. We'll go through some of the chalky players. We'll go through lineup construction, cash plays, the prop side too over there for Underdog, No Hustle Advantage, and prize picks too, I suppose, if you guys have any questions about that. And make sure you guys are ready to rock and roll for this weekend. It should be a fun one. Major championship field, major championship prize pools to be had out there on prize picks, Draftkings, FanDuel, all of those kind of sites. So hopefully you can go out there and take advantage. Looking forward to it. See you guys for that live stream, and I'll catch you guys later on.